paid versus earned marketing. Should businesses concentrate on one, both, or neither? So paid is stuff, advertising, marketing you pay for, and earned is stuff like PR that you don't necessarily pay for, but you earn it. So, Dave, would you like to answer that?
I have no idea. We just like stories, and I think sometimes you can over-professionalise these things. Have you got something to say, and who's it interesting to? I think particularly on anything that is, obviously I know more about PR type, receiving the I haven't used that, heard that phrase before, earned marketing. It's interesting seeing it from the other end of the shotgun, as it were. But ultimately, if people professionalise my industry as well, people say, oh, how do you get something on telly, and what is it, and what makes a good story? And then every single day we watch loads of television and we read loads of stuff on the web, and we decide to click and we don't decide to click. And it's that kind of, would you read it? Would you tell this story in the pub? I mean, we always tell the story at work, about how you'll run around all day doing a story, and then you'll go home in the evening and maybe chatting to a couple of friends, you'll tell the story that you did, and you go, that's funny. The two things I just told you were the bits I cut out of my film. So why is that then? Because when you're making the film, you kind of think, well, I've got to have this in and this in and this in, and then you go home and tell people something else. So you probably should have had them in if they were the bits that you found yourself talking about. But I don't know about the financial side of it. You're all very clever people, so you can enlighten us on that.
Sarah, what's your thoughts on this question?
I think they're outdated concepts. I think talking about paid and earned for is old language, really. I think that you decide who you want to talk to, you decide what your strategy is for your business, and you'll probably end up with all sorts of things in the mix, some of which you may need to pay for, some of which you won't need to pay for. You'll sort of need to pay for all of it at some point because someone's got to do it for you. So I think it's kind of blinding people with science. I just think it's above the line, below the line. We can all talk about these things. I think the most important thing is to decide who you are, what you want to talk about, and then make sure that whatever you do is true to that. And I think just about agencies or in-house, my very strongly held view is it's about what your brand essence is or what your values are, and making sure that whoever you end up working with shares those values. And this afternoon I shall be interviewing 6 people who've put their projects, their campaigns in for CIPR awards, and a lot of what we look for in that is not just did these agencies do great campaigns, but how do they treat their staff, how do they reinvest, what kind of an organisation are they? And I think, I'm not a big giver of advice, but I think a tip in terms of if you're thinking who should you be speaking to, who should you be working with, it's about who you are. And, if you want to play with the big boys, then you need an agency that can do that, but you need to be able to do that too. And I think authenticity is the single most important thing in marketing or in any kind of public relations or communications.
Helen, are you thinking in these terms? Are you sort of thinking this is my paid marketing, this is earned, or is it just
I think it's more like, as you say, it's I don't know whether it's easy to separate anymore. Like if you've got an idea, right, you need to, make a kind of short video on what your product is because you've only got like still pictures. Well, you can do that probably yourself on your phone now because it's pretty good, or you can do something a bit more professional and pay for it. But then I think everything is definitely paid for, but I don't think we separate advertising as like really traditional print stuff, but we don't do any of that. But we do advertising on Facebook, which is wholly paid for. But then if we do a blog and we have to go and take some pictures, or we need to maybe like buy some photos for that, then that's paid for as well. So we don't really separate it like that at all. It's the marketing budget, which always seems to be much bigger than I always allow it to be. But anyway, my business partner does the budget, and I'm just like, no, not going to happen. But no, I think we definitely pay for a lot less than we probably should do in most cases. Like if you have a budget of 10 grand to do a project, then you could probably get about 20 grand's worth of stuff out of it, because you just need to be smart about what you do and about how you can kind of get the same effect and get the same end result, but just free or much less cheap. I don't think that it's a very, it's not one or the other anymore. We don't class it as that anyway. I was trying to think about the stuff that's different, but no.
Andy, what are your thoughts? Can't remember if I haven't asked you, have I? No.
I think for me it's quite straightforward. It comes back to that horrible marketing mix thing again. The aim for every business is to get as many of your marketing channels firing at the same time with a consistent message. So I don't think there's any problem with using advertising to support any PR campaigns or social campaigns that you're doing, and likewise, kind of vice versa. I think where it's getting more confusing nowadays is the blur between, sort of moving away from advertising, is a blur between straight editorial and advertorial. And I think we're lucky. We've got a BBC guy here who's working for probably the most prestigious news outlet in the world. So I don't think I've seen evidence of advertorial anywhere on the BBC. But then if we take that to, say, print media at the moment, where we recently won a retail account, we sat down with a business editor, and they came out straight and said, actually, we're not going to write about your client unless you're going to put some advertising our way as well. Now, that for me, it kind of horrifies me a bit, because I am an old school PR, and I was always taught advertorial is the root of all evil. And so now it pains me a lot that's what a lot of companies have to do. I think that's where the blur is dangerous. And if we look at that online as well, and the debates that are going on at the minute, with bloggers being paid to put links in for SEO, bloggers being paid to put content on their site, and there's no sort of declaration. It comes back to the fact that where are people getting their influence from, and is that influence actually trustworthy? I think that's the danger with paid versus earned. But I think that's as Sarah says, the old paid versus earned is absolutely fine. It's the new age, I think, that's difficult, and I think that's where, as a brand, you've got to make a strategic decision of the route that you're going to go down.
We have the situation quite a lot where people would phone us from like traditional print magazines and papers and stuff, and they say, like, we want to write about your product, but do you want to do some advertising? And you're like, well, if you want to write about our product, then you write about it. And they're like, but it's not that easy. And you're like, well, no. Then it's a sales call, so no, I don't think it's go away. So they kind of like really want the content, and they want something different, because our product's like it's totally unique, and certainly in Europe anyway, and they really want to write about it, but then they want to charge us, and I'm like, well, if you want interesting content, then sorry, you're just going to have to write about it, and I'm not paying you for it. It's
a friend of mine runs an old baby clothes business, Daisy Chain Baby, and I helped her out with a bit of PR, just sort of points her in the right direction, and I said, if you will get calls for advertising, and like one of the massive parent magazines called her and said, oh, would you like a full page spread, basically, and we'll cover you. And I said, no, don't do it. 6 months later, they featured her as website of the week in editorial, half page, pictures and links, and she got traffic from that and made sales. Would she got that directly from the full page ad? It's this. We could have a whole hour, I think, on the paid versus free stuff.
I think this comes back to, as well, making your story interesting. If your story's interesting enough, that in my experience, the media will run it. If you're trying to polish a turd, it's not going to get pickup, is it?
I think you've always got to see it from a consumer's perspective. You've always got to think, what would I like to read? I mean, for me, I look at magazines and I can spot advertorial a mile off, and it just, I can see where products have been placed. When we get calls for advertorial, and they're like, oh, we're doing a feature on children's travel products, and I'm like, well, really, we should be in it, because we're the biggest children's travel brand. So if you're, it's kind of your error if you don't put us in. That sounds really arrogant, but and also there's Dragon's Den features where we get phoned up and like, oh, we want to have Dragon's Den success stories, and it's like, well, we're one of the most famous ones, so if you're going to have an article and not put us in, really, you've overlooked, that's not, you've lost a bit of integrity there for me. I hate advertorial based magazines. They drive me mad. So yeah, you look at it as a consumer, and it's what would you want to read, what would you want to view. Same with sponsored blog posts. They're just, it's so cringeworthy to me.
Yeah, I guess traditional print as well. Advertising's kind of dying a death, so they have to get their money from somewhere.
Yeah.
Luck.
Sorry, and just to say, I mean, things like when we had Boost Back on The Apprentice this time last year, I mean, our web sales just went ridiculous. Our retailers had a fantastic pickup on the product. Sales boosted by over 300%. That's completely not paid for. That's just, I mean, it was terrifying putting your product on The Apprentice, knowing what some of those people do to product. So it was a bit of a leap of faith, but it couldn't have worked out better for us, and that's the sort of thing you can't pay for, and people know that. And it was also BBC, it wasn't this blatant ad. I mean, they didn't mention our product name, our brand once. They weren't allowed to, but people still searched for the product, knew about it, saw on Twitter what it was, and you can't pay for that.